And I do think that one of the reasons that people feel pressure to get married before they leave here is that you're never going to be in quite the active market that you are. You know, you're never going to be surrounded with more like-minded, eligible, marriageable people than you are right now. So, you know, here I am in the marriage superstore, and if I can't find something I can leave with, well, where am I going to shop later?
Okay. So, how old were you guys when you got married?
I was 20.
And I was 21.
Yeah.
19?
I was 18. Yeah. I had just graduated high school.
I just turned 19.
3 months before that.
I turned 20 a month before we got married.
Okay.
And then I would have been 21, and then I turned 22
Shortly
3
after.
months later.
We were 19.
Yeah. I turned 20 shortly after, but yeah.
Yeah, we were
19.
almost 20.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is your primary reason why you got married?
Well, we loved each other, and we'd been together for a long time, and we knew we were going to eventually get married, and we didn't see any longer to wait.
So she started coming and helping out with our youth group. I was a senior, so I was obviously pretty involved in helping out. My dad was the pastor of the church.
And a funny story, you know, we were good friends, like junior year, would you say? Like we became like really good friends, and like, you know, did the whole like, you know, maybe. Yeah, for a long time. And then I finally, you know, I think it's like the last week.
Yeah, the
last week I asked her on a date. So like we just just under the radar, our high school sweethearts.
I got her number. This is the funny part. She sings, I play drums, I'm in the worship band. So I was like, hey, I found her on Facebook, of course. And I messaged her and I was like, hey, give me your number. I'll get it to Blake so that he can get you plugged into our worship team. And so I was very strategic. And I don't even know if I ever sent it to Blake. I don't think I did.
You know, coming out of my high school relationship, there's a lot of leftover just like hurt and distrust in me. And I just remember one night he was sitting on the steps behind the RH and I was pacing back and forth in front of him and I was just basically giving him a free pass to leave. Just like, you don't want this, I'm a mess, like I don't know if I like am capable of loving someone, like I've promised forever to someone and it didn't work out, like I know what this looks like, so you should just leave. And he just let me say my piece and let me freak out. And then when I like said, you know, we have to go back, it's you know, curfew, we just have to go, like we have to leave. He said, okay, you can go, like I'm gonna follow you, like I'm gonna be there with you. And I think that's kind of one of the moments when I knew like he wasn't just messing around. It was, I have all of this junk and I don't know how to process it yet. But this guy with flip out hair is gonna be there and he's gonna walk with me through it.
We knew what we wanted out of life, and we knew what our expectations were of the kind of partner we wanted, and it, you know, we just fit.
She's definitely helped me grow a lot, and that was one of the reasons I definitely wanted to marry her, is because I don't want to marry someone who's like me, first of all, but second of all, who wouldn't really challenge me or anything like that.
I think we get married and we rationalize why we're getting married. And if we're honest, there's a lot of factors. And sexual desire is one of them. And I don't think that's an inappropriate factor. But I doubt it would shock me if people would say that that's their primary reason.
Okay.
I think from the outside, it's easy to point at others and say we think they're doing it for that reason.
I remember, I think it was my freshman year, we read a book called And the Bride Wore White, 7 Secrets to Sexual Purity. That was its full title. And it was all about, you know, like all of these steps you take so that you don't have sex before you're married, and how in the end, like it's gonna be so great, it's gonna be so perfect, like the reward's gonna be just wonderful. And then, you know, go back to 2 nights ago and I'm in bed crying because it's so much harder than that.
I think it's more than that. I think people who actually get married young, who are actual Christians, that's a part of it. I mean, like, I would be lying if I said...
If that's your only reason for getting... That is a problem.
Yes.
If that's the reason...
If that's the reason you get married...
Couples are getting married at Johnson is for sex. That's a bad problem.
Yeah, so we started dating through the summer, and we started having sex. And it was just a part of our relationship. It happened pretty quick, within probably the first month and a half. I had... This is important too. I had the ring, and I had both sides of the family's blessing after a month. I knew I was going to marry Aubrey. It was a definite thing. I can't explain it. It's not the way I ever planned on it. I was going to go to school and graduate and marry my wife, a year after or the summer after or whatever, have kids at 30. I was going to do it the standard way. And I met Aubrey, and that didn't happen.
I feel like the church is very sexually repressed, and the way I remember it is, don't have sex before marriage, okay, and then you get married, and it's just kind of like the switch in your head's supposed to flip, like, oh, you're good, and then everything's going to be great. And in after being married for almost 2 years, it's still hard. But it's funny, I just thought of this analogy. It's like going into an IKEA and like seeing this great bed set. It's already made. You're like, oh, this is awesome. Let's do this. And then you get it home and it's in a box and you're like, oh, we got to put this together.
And none of the directions are in English.
The instructions are in Swedish. Let's just try our best and let's see how this works.
Yeah, and we found out we were pregnant, and first thing my dad said was, so when you get married? Like, okay, I guess sooner rather than later. And we decided we found out on a Wednesday and got married the next Tuesday.
Within a week, 6 days we were married. So
yeah.
We had an official shotgun wedding, and we went to Greenville, South Carolina, where the guy that was marrying us was from. His name was Bob. He's a good guy.
Went to Falls Park there.
Went to Falls Park, and we were like, hey, that's a good spot. And we went over there, and we got married.
I get so frustrated that we're not honest. I get so frustrated that we all have the same IKEA bed, and no one's talking about how painful it is to put it together. And I think that has to change. Like, someone has to talk about it. Because if we don't, we just have a lot of people who are all around us in these other houses, and we're all hurting because no one ever told us it's good, but it takes time.
Like you said, if they have sex in Johnson and they get pregnant, that's a bad way to start anything.
It is.
I wouldn't say you're done forever, but if you don't have a good support system and good parents, you're going to struggle.
But I also think that comes where if you're going to make the decision to have sex, like I said, I don't believe in most Christian relationships that have premarital sex. It's not something that just happens on the fly. It's something you've thought about. There's been lines you've been crossing all along the way. You need to really, really consider the consequences.
The consequences.
And
I don't think Johnson should loosen up on that either.
No.
We can and we should forgive. And we can and we should forgive ourselves. Should a couple who have been intimate before marriage then say, well, we must get married? No. I'm just going to say no. That is, it may be good for them to do that, but for that reason alone or that reason primarily, no. They need to think about it in wider terms than that. Should a couple who have married with that in their background believe that they are doomed? Absolutely not.
I was really hesitant. I didn't know how conservative or crazy Johnson would be about us getting pregnant before marriage and stuff. So I left it off of my application and everything because I was just like, I was that worried about it. I didn't know. I was like, they won't let me in.
So 4 months, I think it was, before we got married, we started living together. And I mean, still, it's like there was no living in sin.
No.
Even then. It was just like, oh no, like we'll wait for marriage. Like,
interesting, and it was helpful in some ways because living with someone is so much harder than you anticipate. I mean, so we got to go through the hard aspects of living together without some of the, aspects of marriage, like sex being involved. We were just like roommates and figuring out, you know, me telling him to put his clothes in the hamper and things like that.
Again, what a horrible teaching, if we're teaching it this way, or a culture that we're creating, to think that, wow, if you've had sex, it's better to get married for bad reasons than it is to deal with the consequences of engaging in a behavior that's inconsistent with your convictions and lifestyle choices. Man, to compound, if viewing this as a sinful act, to compound that with choosing a lifelong commitment like marriage, as we claim it's intended to be, it's just, man, that's just sad.
Just from what I've observed, like I've never lived on campus as a married student, so I can't. I would say that I could see where there would be a lot of pressure.
I think our conversation is severely lacking. You know, you're not allowed to be anywhere. You are a lobby couple if you do take advantage of your only safe space. And we found ourselves, you know, going places by ourselves that we shouldn't have been and doing things we didn't want to do. And I lived with so much shame for, I mean, the year and a half that we were dating and trying to figure it out, because I'd been told my whole life, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And I came to Johnson and it was, I can't hold your hand and feel like that's an okay thing to do. I feel like I can't do that without feeling like everyone's staring at me. And I can't be in the lobby where it's, you know, I'm not going to do anything because everyone's staring, or I hear the complaints later about lobby couples.
And I would say certainly what I noticed when I came here was what is true of a lot of Christian IHEs, institutions of higher education, in this respect, seems especially true here. So that there was more pairing up and more getting married young. And I wouldn't have said so much, from my perspective, not so much pressure to do that, as there is just that is common. Somewhere between accepted and expected.
A lot of newlyweds have trouble because they don't have that support system, and I think in some ways Johnson offers that in a different way.
Yeah, our parents have helped us a lot.
Yeah, except for at Johnson, the people who are your support system are kind of going through it with you, which I think would be a cool dynamic.
You know, the distinct, ever more distinct Christian views of sex and marriage are going to lead to earlier marriage among Christian people. I would expect that. You know, what I think we have at Johnson, in addition to that, is not intentionally and not in a bad way, but we have situations and structures which actually even subsidize that, okay? You can, not immediately, but over time, two can live cheaper than one in general, and that's true in terms of scholarshiping and housing and that kind of thing as well. So if a couple meet and fall in love and consider marriage, in another environment it might not be affordable until later, but here it might be more affordable than living singly.
If you're single indefinitely, the assumption, I think, that there's a cultural assumption that something's wrong, that why didn't you get married? Which I think maybe college life is kind of a microcosm, a mini version of that same thing. Frankly, the 35-year-old who's single in our local churches, I think, faces a greater stigma than the 22-year-old who graduates Johnson and is single still.
In my graduating class, there were 13 girls that graduated. I was one of 6 that was not married or engaged. And so that's, you know, more than 50%, just because that 7th were married. And so I felt like the odd one out. But that hit my head at the time. That's why I remember those numbers. because it impacted me. But it didn't change because I already had goals, which was a job and other things going on, and well, then graduate school. And since those things were set, I knew the information, but it didn't change the way I approached things, if that makes sense. I didn't go out seeking a husband just because I thought I needed to be married.
When we're assigning what other people think of us, that probably tells you more about us than it does what other people actually think. And so if I'm saying I'm graduating single and people look down on me, that reveals more of my filter than it does what other people actually think.
So here we are in the post-sexual revolution 21st century West, where we've separated sex and procreation and sex and marriage and everything else, we think. And that would seem to give a greater place to singleness. Yet every popular movie ends with the way everyone wants their story to end, and nobody wants to be alone.
Yeah, I see it with her friends. It's a pressure to even have a boyfriend. If you don't have one, you're, like you said, what's wrong with you?
And if there are milestones or norms that you're measuring yourself against, maybe critically evaluating, why am I measuring myself against that? Who made the rule that I'm supposed to be married by 22? Or that I shouldn't get married at 22. And if I get married before that, then it's too early. Often we're playing by other people's rules, and they're not. They're not our rules. We've just kind of assumed them.
All of the neuroscience tells us that your brain's executive function doesn't really come into its own until you're about 25. The prefrontal cortex doesn't coordinate all the other parts of the brain really well until you're 25. And so what that means is that you can do some amazing things when you're younger, and you can also do some really profoundly stupid things when you're younger. You can do that when you're older, but you've got a stronger neurological chance of managing it. So what all of that means is that there is, speaking over broad populations, there's more risk to making life-changing decisions before you're 25. That doesn't mean that they're all bad, etc. So to a certain extent, I think that's what we deal with when, now, and I'm saying that my wife and I got married when we were 21. So, I feel like I know whereof I speak, but 21-year-old John and Tammy were not 26-year-old John and Tammy.
I mean, getting pregnant early on was hard, but it was mostly hard because of how sick I was.
But also, the pregnancy, not so much, but once Dominic was born, there just wasn't a lot of, spiritual support going on, at our church.
I think what's important to note about young marriage is that you're just coming out of being under your parents in a household, or whoever your caretakers are. You're under somebody, you're in submission to them, and now we just flipped a switch and got married, and now we are the I don't know how to explain it. We are now the caretakers, we are now the parents, so we are flipping really, really quickly through these switches.
I think sometimes we go into those relationships feeling like that we're going to change them, or that's how they're going to be the rest of their life, and that's not. And if they change, then, well, this is not what I agreed to.
My mom and I were really close when I lived at home, so I think it was a lot of her trying to separate herself and understand, I'm married now, I'm not her best friend, and, I've got to kind of separate a little bit, and that kind of put a strain on Ben and I for a while, because I would go and run to my mom anytime I was upset with him or frustrated about something with my in-laws, and I would vent it all to her, and so that didn't really go over too well, just, out of respect for keeping things some things confidential between Ben and I and letting us have our own arguments and fights and not sharing it with everyone.
At church, we're given a lot more responsibility over things than other people our age.
Yeah.
We have kids, like not kids, teenagers. Our parents have asked us to mentor.
Yeah.
Because they said, we think you're doing good, and I'm like, okay. But they would not ask someone who's, just got out of college, who's trying to get their life together, to pour into their children. And I think that's what's touched me the most, is when our assistant pastor him and his wife came to us and were like, we want you two to mentor our girls who are 10 and 14. And that really touched me, that those are the most precious things they have, and that they look at us and they think we're good enough examples together to want them to pour into Hallie and Mackenzie.
When parents begin to respect their kids as adults and as their own parents, and that changes everything. I mean, as soon as his parents and my parents respected us as Ben and Aubrey, we have our own kids, we have our own way of doing things, it just changed everything. And then because they respect us, we respect them and love each other a little more.
When Browen left for Guatemala, we were already, pretty serious, like dating, and, for 2 months, all we had was verbal communication at the beginning of a relationship, and so that, I think that flavored everything differently, and that so very early on we were very comfortable just communicating.
I think something I didn't expect was feeling so free to talk about anything I'm struggling with, like whether it's a personal thing, just processing through, I don't know why I'm so frustrated with this, friend of mine right now, like I don't know what's going on, let me just talk about this with you, and having him there to listen, as well as just being able to talk about when I'm frustrated with him, like to say like, this is really bothering me and I'm having a hard time and I love you, but I don't know, like I don't know how to do this, and the freedom to say, right now I'm not happy, I don't want to not be happy, but I'm not happy, so what can we do?
Traditionally, colleges have used a Latin phrase, in loco parentis, in the place of parents, to describe the way that they approach students. The American higher ed establishment gave that idea up during the protests of the Vietnam War, because students said, we don't want you to be our parents, and the colleges looked at them and said, we're looking at you and we don't want to claim you, so we won't do that. That is, except for Christian higher ed. And quite frankly, one of the things that makes Christian higher ed attractive to a lot of parents is that we still do en loco parentis. You'll be safe there, that's what you hear. Now, colleges are better parents than no parents, but they're not very good parents. And they're trying to parent a lot of people at once with student handbooks and disciplinary committees and things like that. And those are ineffective parenting needs. Now we're also trying to parent them with curricula, and with what we do in class and other kinds of things that are positively formative and instructive and so forth, and are really, but no, this is correct. But the flip side of that is that if you're not ready to start adulting in a hurry, postpone marriage.
I view myself as mom, but I always put it back into their court because it shouldn't be my decision. That I don't know their true heart, but I do help guide them through. And I think there's a lot of other professors that help with that as well.
What can we do to convey to people that you are whole and complete in yourself, and you don't need to find a partner and a spouse to find that fulfillment and meaning? And what do you do when you've defined a certain sexual ethic and you're not living within that? And who are the safe people to talk to? What are the consequences when you're not living within a certain code of conduct? What do you do when you choose and you come to a conviction that you disagree with others that you're in community here on campus, whether in terms of definitions and what you should or shouldn't do? I think that's having that conversation at multiple levels is good,
maybe we need to have a campus day for singles, or I don't know. I mean, but those kinds of things to draw awareness to it so that people are not so awkward, feeling about it and knowing that it's okay. I think the administration and the faculty and staff that work with students, and even our churches outside of here, have that mindset as well for the most part.
Colleges say, we see an issue, we propose a solution. It's often, let's have a class or a program or a rule or something like that. Then we say, well, we have addressed that question, that problem, that issue. Okay. It's that last step that's the problem. Okay. Because what we really need to say is, okay, we've done that, now let's watch and see how it goes and see what else we need to do. Okay. So really there, I would say probably most of what we need to do, my sense would be, is not so much look at a revision, a review and revision of rules and scholarship policies and housing policies and curriculum and so forth. All of that is useful and important and necessary. But we also need to think about the ways that we as faculty and staff and student to student are engaged with each other in conversation.
And you just kind of realize that sometimes of, that's my whole life that I'm saying I'm going to be with this person. I'm saying I'm never going to go on another date. I'm never going to, pursue the little butterflies I feel or anything like that again. So in a moment of just chaos and wondering what to do, I met up with one of the professors on campus, Dr. Rodriguez actually, to talk about this with him, because I knew he and I are kind of similar in some ways, and so he could help speak into this. And he was saying that when he and Andrea were engaged, he kind of had a similar moment, and he was just driving around a town where they lived and just kind of was reminding himself that, marriage is a choice. It's every day I wake up and I choose you. Every day, no matter how I feel, no matter what's going on around us, I wake up and I choose you. I choose to be here. I choose to be present. I choose to be fully in this marriage. And that really stuck with me.